of our problems. Help us and give us the understanding, oh God, to reach out and to grasp the information that we need and to feel that thou art with us to help us to solve the problems that have been with us for a long time. Please guide us and help us to have open minds and to be guided towards what is right for our patients.
It is such a very great pleasure for me to see all of you out there, because I feel by your very presence, you indicate your interest in the issue that is before us today. We are all concerned for those who engage in the practice of nursing, that they may be utilized in conditions to become care of ill patients. I commend all of you for taking time off to come to the meeting to participate and to learn of the issue we are talking about today. I also invite you to actively participate in what we talked about. As you are aware, we are primarily turning our thinking to the operation of the registry of those nurses who are private practitioners. As most of you know, the Nurses Professional Registry now exists has approximately 80 registrars. Other nurses and private practice nurses are receiving their calls from colleagues at the hospitals. In the past 2 years, I've signed forms have been signed to keep this registry open on a full-time basis. It seems to be imperative now that we think again of our situation and make some decisions as to what we will do in the future. Mr. James Hudson is here with us at the request of the private duty section, and I have asked him if he will speak to the point of registries, district sponsorship, or alternatives. Mr. Hudson, by the way, is a registered nurse
Within the total American Nurses Association, we're almost at the 200,000 mark as far as membership. Membership is composed of registered nurses who are in many areas of practice within the field of nursing. Some of these areas of practice are complementary with others. Others appear to be competitive. We have an organizational way of attempting to meet the needs of the membership of the American Nurses Association. We call them districts, and states, and the national. Now, I'm not here to give you a history of the organization, I know. But I do believe that some of our remarks should be within the context of the purposes of the professional association. And the purposes, there are multi-purposes. But basic to them all is and should be the improvement of practice. We have many side issues that face the profession of nursing. We have many programs that deal with it, but paramount, the highest priority, is that for the improvement of the practice of nursing. Now, one method that we have used organizationally is to gear program activities within districts and the state and the national to help nurses improve practice. And hopefully that the recipient of this will then be the consumer of our service. That's the public. And so I feel that the discussion today should center around the role of the public, the consumer, the role of the practitioner, the deliverer of the service, and then the organization that's setting a framework for meeting through group efforts nurses' needs and nursing needs. Now, I do not believe that I am here this afternoon to talk about the role model of the proper functioning of a district nurses association. We will get into this subject a little bit. I believe that I have been asked to be here to talk about a certain activity which is centered within the district association, and that activity is the placement of private practitioners of nursing to meet the community's needs for this particular type of service. Now, I assume everyone in this room is familiar with the operation of a nurse's professional registry. It can be many things to many people. It can be a pure business operation. The placement of so many nurses to meet so many direct calls for the adult. It can be a program of professional association, primarily through the district association, whereby through educational means and through an understanding of the needs that people with certain skills are matched to certain identifiable needs. This latter remark is the context within which nurses' professional registries originally was conceived and part of the association back in 1920. Now, if you have a problem, and I assume that you do, I believe that it is very important that we start to segregate out whether we are problems of this enterprise within it. Because when the district upholds standards on nursing practice, it often runs into a collision with the current method of operation of the placement service. Because upholding standards can be very, very costly financially. And these are some of the issues that I believe need to be looked at. Now, you have groups who have the authority to make decisions. The most that I can offer is certain background information, whatever consultation service appears appropriate to your needs. The decisions will be made by those bodies with the authority for this investment. Now, it is difficult to remove the emotion associated with one's position or the continuance of one's position or job from the facts of the situation. And so I sympathize with private practitioners of nursing who have a very vested interest in an arrangement whereby they may continue to obtain work. I also sympathize with a district association who has many purposes, the paramount one being of education, and the secondary would be other arrangements or carrying out an assist to its members. Now, we could go either way to discuss this if you think it would be helpful, and I would need your guidance on whether you want information about other professional registries. I can't tell you about your own situation. You're the ones that can speak effectively in this subject. But the role of a professional association, the role of a placement service within this, and how these two can meet, work cooperatively, or whether they continue to be competitive and so almost help to deteriorate each other. Now, are there any reactions to anything I've said so far? Well, let me ask you a question then. Do you feel that the needs of the community are being met through the current arrangement within District 5 for the placement of private practitioners of nursing?
No.
Then we've isolated, I think, the problem. Now, do you believe that other arrangements than the current one can be described and made effective in meeting the community's needs for this type of service? And if you do, then I think one of the next steps is to try and describe the arrangement that you feel would be an alternative to the current. Now, if I can back up just a little bit and say that the American Nurses Association is a voluntary membership group whose membership is composed of registered nurses. Our multi-purposes of an organization should be geared to meeting the needs of the membership. Now, since we are not an enclosed group ignoring society, and we understand that we're in the practice of nursing because we must have had a desire to help meet the needs of society, therefore, we must take into consideration that we exist as a profession only because society permits us to exist. It can give and can take away professional privileges. Now, if the community or society, I'm using these words interchangeably, desires an arrangement whereby those individuals who, as private practitioners, are regardless of what this district does, society is going to make an arrangement to get that service, one way or the other. Now, the professional association can work with society, or it can stand back and say that we'll be exclusive and handle it any way we want to, and to heck with society. And when you do this, you don't exist very long. Now, the federal government enters into the placement of service in relation to taxation on monies which accrue from this particular service. The professional association, the American Nurses Association, enjoys certain tax exemptions on the basis that primarily our purpose is education. We have to look very carefully at the activities that are carried on within the association to be sure that we are meeting this obligation. Now, I'm pinpointing this in dollars and cents because many of us relate very well to this particular issue. If a district association enjoys tax exemption on the basis of its purposes, and one of the purposes happens to be that of the placement of its members for their gain through employment, then you have to be very sure that built within this placement is also an identifiable factor of education, hopefully professional counseling and placement, and the educators involved in matching the right person with the need. And it's not just what a telephone answering service can do and saying, Mary Jones is next on the list and she is placed. There is the call. Now, I raise this issue because I believe that among several alternatives that can be suggested for an arrangement for meeting the community's needs as far as the private practice of nursing is concerned, is that you have to look carefully at the groups that you are placing. In other words, very bluntly, what business does the professional association whose membership is comprised of registered nurses, what business does it have placing all of those in supportive services to nursing? There are many titles to this, and I use that for anyone who is not covered in the Nurse Practice Act. And what this will do to the specific aspect of the funds or the financial resources of the association. Now, I have with me the briefs which have been prepared by law firms from several parts of our country, in which they have appealed to the United States Treasury Department for a waiving of the action that has been instituted to remove the tax exempt status of the Nurses Registry and of the District Association and the state, because all three, in one instance, has been threatened because the registry is involved in the placement of individuals beyond the basic membership of this organization. And it's difficult or impossible for this registry to show that in any way they were involved in an educational phase of this operation, out-and-out business procedure. So that when you think of alternatives or you think of your current method, also be concerned with the appropriateness of this activity within the purposes of why you have a district association. There are no simple answers. This is a very complex, as each of you here, I'm sure, appreciates complex situation. I can mention one thing, you can counter with three others, and we can, keep on with this. I do think that behind any type of decision must be the concern for meeting the community's needs. And whatever arrangement you effect, this should be the ultimate goal, meeting the community's needs. Continuing your current arrangements
I might say this word, as I judge, the two basic alternatives you just discussed. Number one, being a nurse's registry within the district, limiting placement on the registered nurse. Or two, changing its space to a sponsorship by a community website agency with a water control primarily made up of the nurses association.
That's right.
Where you place all types of
That's right. And I would assume, just take for the point of discussion, so we can get other people commenting here. If, say, the latter arrangement is one which is effective, since registered nurses would be involved, and we're talking specifically about this service and the needs for it, I would hope that the district association would be able to maintain its surveillance of professional standards of nursing care as the group most competent to deal with this particular quality of care, which is nursing. Now, other people are going to have judgments about it, rightfully or wrongfully, but I think that as a professional group, we in nursing should make a determination on what are the standards of nursing care. The delivery of the service is something else. It can be through a business arrangement, through a mechanism different than what you have at the present time, or what you have can be shored up in various ways and continue on. The community has many needs in the health area. Nursing is only one of them. And the association up to now, the district association, has primarily been concerned with the placement of registered nurses. Now, when the field of private practice nursing composed of registered nurses did not grow along with the other fields or areas of practice, this created a certain problem in supply and demand. Now, one of the immediate symptoms of this problem is the financial strait that nurses professional registry got into, because the group primarily utilizing it could not support this particular type of service. And so practical nurses were brought into it, not from any real humanitarian aspect, but to help pay for it. Now, as a result of this, there were certain community needs practical nurses could be where the judgment and the skills of the registered nurse and the determination of some groups were not necessary. This will talk about the proper utilization of people. There are many registries that place individuals, one common term for it is sitter. And this is done from the standpoint that there can be a certain surveillance with little or no judgment brought to it other than this is when I call somebody else type of activity. This again is done not from a humanitarian but from helping to shore up the finances of this particular registry operation. And I think we have to look very critically at what it is we are dealing with. A business operation within the functions of a professional association, but realizing that this business operation can do several things. One, it can help a group of our members maintain their practice. It can help meet a community's needs. And it can also help in the upgrading of standards if there's an accompanying professional counseling and placement educational programs associated with it. So I'm not talking against a professional registry service by any means, but I'm trying to bring out some of the points that need to be considered if a group is faced with the decision of what arrangement is best for this group at this particular time. And this has nothing to do with what you might have done X years ago or what you might do 10 years from now. We're trying to deal with the issue which I believe is in front of you. practitioners utilizing the registry and their fees to support the salary of the registrar and the supporting clerical assistance that's needed in this. So the district board came to a decision that regretfully they must stop their sponsorship of this activity. Now, the private duty nurses who now no longer have this formal arrangement for the placement of their service got together and decided that they were trying to meet the community need, and therefore the community should be involved, and rather than go home and just be very unhappy about it, they started talking to me. What evolved out of that was an arrangement whereby the many service groups who primarily dealt with health in its broadest aspect pooled their resources, got someone to do the management and coordination of these various resources, nursing only being one of them. And this arrangement has been in operation for quite a number of years, and the most satisfied group of private duty nurses who had felt earlier they could never exist unless they had a traditional arrangement within the district. They have a voice in matters which concern them. The district plays a role in speaking out on the standards of practice. The community has an involvement by membership on the board of management of this total service, which primarily involves the business arrangement for seeing this is conducted. Now, some of the other groups who use it are the Heart Association, the Cancer Association, the Alcoholic Anonymous group for this district, and there are the multiple sclerosis, and they do a certain answering of questions, the assisting in the placement of homemaker service, home health aides, and this whole category of supporting assistance, which the community has needs for. Now, the nurses are placed within this arrangement to meet those needs of the community which come within the category of professional practice of nursing, and this has to be continually defined. Does that answer the question?
Is this area large and wide?
No, it happens to be a smaller community. It's definitely a smaller community. Right?
I have that comment, but, so much a year or our case.
Each one of the participating organizations exclusive of the District Nurses Association contributes money from their funds, and most of these funds, again, come from the community through whatever method of collection may be. The private practitioners of nursing pay a rather modest fee as their contribution, since there is no organized group which is really, supplying them. Because I think we have to go back thinking that we have a group of nurses who have made a determination on their own that they will sell their services on an open market, and their services have to be nursing. And they've arranged for a private contractual arrangement with those people who have needed their services. Now, this can be done on an individual basis, and then it ends up that it is the seller and then the purchaser. But since this is sometimes a difficult way to ensure oneself a steady employment or guaranteed annual wage in its broadest sense, groups have come together and decided by a group we could do more, or we could get stability to this by group activity. And that's why we had professional registries emerge. And when you had 15 or 20 or 500, and you had to employ personnel to keep time records, to collect bills, to do certain other activities in regard to placement. But fundamental to this is the nurse's own choice for See, you may think I'm making speaking to the partial phrase, I hope that I am not, but I have to back up just a little bit because the whole premise of the American Nurses Association is voluntary membership. It really is. It's built into the reasons why professional people need to group together as opposed to professional people independently carrying out their professional practice. I would assume that since the American Nurses Association was founded about 1896, that there have been reasons that have kept the group together, and there will be reasons in the future that will keep the group together. The association may change while we know it. Very possible. All right. Now, in addition to being a member of your professional association, there was another arrangement that dealt with the delivery of the private practitioner service, which cost extra money, if you will. Because if the professional registries had evolved as a true distribution center for all practitioners, whether you were a salaried employee, a consultant, or a more direct practitioner involving nursing care, this then might have been conceived as an overall district program. But we have singled out one group, primarily, traditionally, which has been the private practitioner of nursing. And this is the arrangement that we've grown up with. Now, I think that the individual nurse, if she is practicing private duty nursing, must make a decision on whether she wishes to align herself with the organized effort within her profession, ANA. That's one factor. If she wishes to go through a professional registry, then she pays the cost of this particular arrangement. And these two, you see, are mixed in together but are really quite separate. Now, I would assume that all the other members of the district association who are not using this arrangement would have something to say if the basic resources of the total district were used to underwrite this arrangement for a small group or a large group, whatever it would be. And here's where we get some of the emotion brought into what really should be a fairly clinical diagnosis of a problem, and that is, can you afford this particular arrangement? If you cannot, then what other arrangements can you make?
Am I getting you right that you have an idea that our district underwrote our expenses for our registry or handling that because they did not?
I'll move a little bit away from money, and let's talk about the human resources. Which can put dollars and cents on, I'm choosing not to do that. As I've traveled throughout the country, and I've been in the national office since 1960, the main topic at state board meetings of the state board of directors and the district has been registry problems. The time that has been spent on this, it added up and translated into programs of improvement of practice might have meant something different than the delivery of health care to people in this country. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that we must keep this operation within the proper perspective of the reasons why we have a district association or a state association or a national. Because considerable time has been spent by the national committee to deal with nurses' professional registry problems. And it costs us over $3,000 for each committee meeting we have nationally because of the travel of people. And so the time and the money that's been involved over the years with this particular arrangement is something which eventually we should be accountable for to the community or to ourselves. Now, every time I say that, I must then move in very quickly to say that the community wants this type of service, has every right to expect it and should get it and will get it. All we're registered nurses. And I'm not going to argue on that, I'm just trying to restate some facts, we have facts in front of us. Now, I believe it would be necessary to check out legal counsel whether you could, within the district association, be involved in the ownership and management of this type of distribution center without seriously jeopardizing your tax arrangement with the government on a state, district basis. Because I understand that your districts are not separately incorporated, they're incorporated in the overall incorporation of the state, which makes the state then ultimately responsible for this activity. Now, this is something you simply, I wouldn't know, but my judgment would be good here at all. But this is something you would need to check out carefully with legal counsel to be sure that you have not just simply added another type of problem by being disciplined. Now, it may be possible. If it is possible, then I think a group that has the authority and responsibility for making a decision should ask itself very carefully how much of our time, because time is a part of management, would be spent in the surveillance of a distribution that covers the gamut, considers up through professional nurses. Because if you have any problems now with practical nurses, you're going to have a different type of involvement in the problem when you have people whose basic responsibility is sitting and making certain observations to call up people. And you see, the group that makes the placement is held responsible for this, because there has to be some type of a judgment as a part of the management of the group, who then says that yes, these are the policies under which this registry operates. And it goes all the way back up to the state, because the arrangement within the standards set up by National many years ago was that the State Nurses Association was the approving authority for professional registries. National only set guidelines and standards that states might use. The district traditionally had the responsibility of the ownership and management, but did not have the responsibility of the approval authority that was vested in the state. Now, this has been our traditional arrangement. Within the suggestion that I find on this piece of paper, one would have to make several accommodations to what has been the traditional way, which, maybe this is what should be.
If we excluded the LPNs and suits, then this would work. It would be financially supported.
Yes, because I think then your fundamental question, can you assure that there will be enough utilizers of this arrangement to underwrite the expenses of it? This is a part of calculated risk.
Because there has been, if the hospitals use it, and they have promised that they will, if it's set up under these rules, but of course not excluding suits and LPNs. We're going to take care of LPNs and practice nurses. Well, other states have LPNs on their register because they feel they can have better control of the practical nurses if they are on their register. Taxes in Alabama, they've had it for years, practical nurses.
Yes, there are many nurses' professional registries that place practical nurses because over the years we've documented through our nurse practice acts that there are two groups that are traditionally doing nursing: registered nurse and practical nurse. So that we have custom behind us in this type of an argument. I suppose that if we include sitters, and we were talking 25 years now, maybe we'd say custom is that. I think that the main point, as I see it here, is what is the purpose of the district association and its involvement in the distributing of supporting services to nursing? And this is a question which groups will answer, according as they see it, as they desire. Now, in this district, I would assume you would make a decision along that line, and if you feel that this is an appropriate operation within the district, and legal counsel clears jeopardy all the resources of the association, it's a desire of the group that has the right to make a decision, then this will be your arrangement.
Would not this be a joint arrangement?
The only difference between a commercial registry and a nurse's professional registry are those standards which we in the profession have set up that the others can't meet, and that is membership in the association. Because you see, we can require within the American Nurses Association by the district boards voting this, or the state boards voting it, that since this is a district-operated, sponsored, sanctioned activity, we have every right to say that those who use it shall be members who can meet the qualifications for membership, and that would be any nurse who holds a current license and then meets certain other standards and qualifications that is set up by the review committee that admits them into membership. Now, excluded would be practical nurses because they cannot meet the requirement of having a registration such as we recognize by law or citizens of it. Now, I haven't at all touched upon what I think is a very delicate problem, and that is levels of practice. And I don't know whether you want any discussion or whether you feel
Yes, they asked if we might be here. We'd like to know how you can set up levels of nursing if you don't do it through the membership. Or how do you set up?
well,
Just on your evaluators.
first, I think you have to have some discussion that do we all mean the same thing to say levels of practice? Otherwise, we're going to get off some fancy discussion and talking about the same thing, but using simply different words. Let me share with you the context in which I use it, and then we can go from there. The professional association is using types of practice. They're veering away from the word levels, but this infers somehow good and bad, above and below tradition. We're trying to say that there are types of practice. We think it is very difficult to speak about gradations within types of practice because we're having a real difficult time identifying what is generic or basic nursing. And you have to get your base before you can decide whether you're above or below it. Now, if you and I are talking about the competency of Mary Jones as she practices nursing, and we say that she is an efficient, competent nurse, and you say, all right, explain to me on the basis which you make this judgment. All right? If she met the patient's needs, she might be an extremely poor nurse because the patient's needs might be such that whatever you did worked against his improvement in health. And you know, to give examples of this. Now, if the nurse carried out, without question, the medical orders, which in some instances are very scanty, then is she a good or a bad nurse? Is she competent or not competent? Are we getting into talking about levels? Is she exercising the judgment that is supposedly associated with this professional practice, and that our body of knowledge helps us make these judgments, our experience add to this? Then who makes the judgments on whether these are levels? Is it one's peers? The people who are doing the same thing that the scion do? Is it the educators? Is it the utilizers of the service and so forth? It's not easy to talk and make distinctions about levels of practice within the context of what I'm saying. And so I say it's a very delicate and touchy subject because we don't have enough yet identified within the body of knowledge which is nursing to stand up under very careful scrutiny upon levels of competency. Now, I think we're working with deliberate speed towards this. The association is attempting through the newly created divisions on practice of medical surgical nursing, psychiatric nursing, maternal child health nursing, geriatric nursing, and community health nursing to very difficult to do for private practitioners when they turn around and say to their friend working the room next to them, whatever, judge me. Many of you know the difficulties that have arisen from the activity a few years ago when private duty nurses decided if they devised an evaluation form and they got someone to evaluate them, and 9 times out of 10 they went to the director of nursing services staff and asked for an evaluation, and they said no. I have no way of evaluating. Or in some instances, they did make an evaluation. So it is not easy to get in to put any meaning to levels of practice right now. Now, the American Nurses Association's former National Private Duty section prepared a document which was distributed at the Vienna Convention in June of '66, in which it dealt with classifications. And I think probably a lot of you are familiar with the document, which was the classification 1 and 2. And I don't really know anybody right here in the folder, whether you know one was the person that had more education experience. Now this was done on the basis that the needs of patients for nursing care in certain situations called for specialty information and experience. And that one of the ways you could get this was through added educational programs or through supervised experience. And so one built up a body of knowledge and became expert in this area. And so therefore, if you were expert, you could sell your services for more money. This is a tradition of our society. It's a unique nursing means. Now, this particular proposal, which was shared with all the state nurses associations, and last week was in California, made inquiries of some of the group, and they're having difficulty putting any meaning to this because they have not built in any method of evaluating the competency of the private practitioner. Now, we know how judgments are made as far as the value of a private practitioner. The doctor can say she's good, the director of nursing can say she's good, the fellow private duty nurse can say she's good, the patient can say she's good, or then they reverse their timeline. And that doesn't seem to be a very systematic way of getting involved in levels of competency. Now, dollars and cents have been attached in California to grade 1 and grade 2. And for the sake of the discussion, grade 2, let's say you can bring $35, and grade 1 can bring $30. And I would assume that the patient would have every right to say, what am I getting for the $5 additional? You know, if they're in a condition as this or that. But this then would be the business of the person selling the service and the person purchasing it. But if the arrangement is through the professional association, the sanctity of the district association is added to this operation, and you have a district's obligation to see that any such arrangement like this has some validity to it. Because you're the upholder of the standards of nursing. You're the organized group to do this. And I'm not talking about a healthcare facility's obligation for, its arrangement for delivering health care. I'm not talking about that at all. An employer has certain responsibilities and rights and so forth, and that I'm not talking about. I assume that the representative United States Treasury Department could well scrutinize the operation of any enterprise which placed the gamut from sitter up through professional practitioner as to whether this is a rightful enterprise in the district association, since its purposes are fairly clearly spelled out in bylaws, and lumping them all together, it is the improvement of practice, the education of the practitioners who are its members. Because many of these groups will be non-members.
Well, they say that I have two registered on one roof. Just have
seriously upsetting by the payment of taxes, the operation of the district, which is basically this multi-purposed arrangement for improvement practice. Now, there's nothing wrong with the nurses' professional registry, so I hope I'm not being misunderstood. I'm talking about making judgments on whether you can afford it through financial or human resources and the appropriateness of the overall endeavor. And if this is not done, if there is no arrangement for meeting the community's needs other than through a healthcare facility, then the district has to back up and does have this as a concern, because we stand for the delivery of nursing care. Now, I would assume that the district board, if it decides that it cannot have an arrangement for a registry, would then have to spend considerable time working with important people in the community to see that some arrangement is effective and that they have a say-so in the standards that involve nursing. So, it's our overall responsibility to what degree and how we carry it out. I think this is part of the, what's before us.
Yeah, but our problem is not a unique one. You say you see this across the country. How many professional registries do you see now under the direction of the district as compared to 10 years ago?
There are around 185, I'm using round numbers because I might have trouble documenting that. Around 10 years ago, they were closer to 250. Every year, you see more professional registries going out of business. The tragedy is that in some areas where they've gone out of business, there has been no substitute arrangement for seeing that the community's needs were met, which I think is an obligation of the District Association. Now, I get calls in the national office from registrars, and I'll be very specific in this situation, that the registrar called me and said that their registry, which was not under district sponsorship, could no longer operate because of financial problems. She wanted to know what she would do with the confidential records, what she would do with really what had been amassed as a part of this arrangement. There was and I have not found an organized group, so I would become the yellow pages, and I'm sure that many people have been caught in the same situation, and this hardly seems like the way that one would like to see the delivery of this service is through notice on the bulletin board or the telephone pages or word of mouth, and so that's why I think the professional organization got into the business of helping to see that there was an arrangement.
Should follow bylaws, I don't think we do it this year now. We are bylaws, we care about.
I think the thing that precipitated many of the hospitals not
no hospital would accept anybody on the staff unless they're member of your standing. I mean, your problem in my mind resolves itself down to 2 or 3 other simple areas. And what is, you got to have control, and you got to have authority. I can well remember when no doctor's office was south of Grand Terrace, and every hospital in Atlanta was within a mile radius, which is all over stuff. Outside every university, which is just a few miles away. And therefore, a central register was a very practical and very useful purpose. But now, with tremendous diversification of our medical facilities, and nurses and professional people being individuals like doctors, they don't want to be told they live in Marietta, they're going to nurse and South folks or vice versa. They won't have some individual choice as to whether there was the preface to hospital, the preface to doctor position to be allowed to have. Well, it used to be that there was no doctor, maybe one doctor in West End, no doctors in Forest Park, 1 or 2 doctors in Marietta, and a third of all the doctors were in the whole state of Georgia, or within about 10 blocks down Peach Street and West Peach Street. We are now no longer with them. We're going to have to go into, to my mind, into a compromise on a hospital. To my mind, the answer to it is that the private duty registry should have an administrative professional in each hospital which would administer the services of a professional nurse. And I would consider that first. But I think the licensed practical and the practical considers will follow. But I think once we can place the private duty professional registered nurse in the hospital and in the geographic location in which she desires to work and give some equity to each hospital in each area, then we will have accomplished a lot. The central area will still be, would be necessary, to my mind, for the placement in the homes and in the extended care facilities, which is going to comprise all of your real private duty nurses. But I think we're going to have some enforcement, some authority through the hospital administration and the hospital staff saying we would accept the judgment of the private nurses registry and the administrative utilization of our nurses in our hospital and not take it arbitrarily upon themselves. You say, we'll take all of these nurses and we'll use them, you don't have any. Not only should they utilize them in each area, but they should also be utilized to their greatest benefit within that hospital. In many instances, of course, nurses take it on themselves. Say this patient doesn't need that's never done. See to it that was done. But to my mind, there's no solution to it except to go with the hospital areas, with the geographic areas, and put the registry in there instead of trying to hold it in one central pool. It can be administered to a central authority, a central committee, but I cannot see how you can say to one, and that's too big. The traffic problem is too great. If you're on 11-7, it wouldn't be much fun to have to drive all across town back and forth in the morning for 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it's very practical where they live and where they want to work.
Well, with our professional register, though, we always have a choice of hospitals that we call in to go on and say,
Well, I know we have evidence, but I know them.
and usually, the girls either work 1 or 2 hospitals, in the area. On occasion, we go to hospitals, but it was all of the calls were placed from the hospital through the central register. And some of the hospitals even had their own call list of girls that
well as throughout the country.
I don't feel that the district is much of a hospital, I mean, but at least that's right.
If I may give an example, I think the problem is geographic too. I think this has a great deal to do with it, and not the fact that the nurses went up in their rates, because patients still pay the same rate. I happen to have gone to a new hospital on the south side of town 5 years ago, and there was not a hospital there at that time. We called the registry for 2 years, and they couldn't send the nurse, or they may have sent, I'm sure, no more than 8 within a 2-year period. This doesn't meet community needs. We were new, but we were in the community. And to give patient care, we had to do something. So we interviewed our own nurses, and they can give patient care. And hopefully, that's why we're here to figure out how to get patient care, not only in South Wilton, which is not, in a very central location, but all over the Atlanta area. And, from my point, we only went to our own college for teaching.
Well, I would assume something happened to interrupt the system that you had.
I tell you what the trouble is, many of the hospitals are not requiring the nurses to go on the registry, to belong to A&A, or
That's
state
the whole-
organization. And the thing about it is, the state and the district is suffering because of private nurses. Here, in 1965, of the 4,500 members of A&A, 2,500 throughout the state were private nurses. So your staff nurses are not being members of a professional organization. And they can be required to, if their directors require that each hospital be 100%, because I've worked in other states where our director nurses in the hospital, general duty would say, unless you pay your dues by a certain date, it will be cut out of your pay. If you don't do it voluntarily. And it has been done.
I don't think the nurses should belong to anything because they're required. I think they should belong to.
Because they want
That's
to.
how they want to.
Because they
And
want
once
to.
they work, whether or not you work in private duty or public health, you should belong to your nursing organization. Nurses are together, not required to belong to A&A, yet a large percent of them do. And every nurse who works under me, go on.
Right, because you want your special time. You want to say right, and
So
that's
I
what
think
you
we should
want.
be receptive to requiring items. If you're registered in the hospital, you should belong to A&A. If you're registered on the register, you should belong to A&A. What's the difference?
But what we're trying to make our point is though, by the girls having to meet certain standards to be on the register.
According to my personal law in Georgia, you cannot require anyone to belong to a relationship work. That's where they cannot demand you,
It'd be the hospital who did
the
it.
hospital.
It will be up to the director.
And of course, that's how it has been. We have a problem with it.
Well, if you're talking about section 14, you get tax office law. I think one thing, if you're talking about a voluntary professional association, something, the other thing, is that's a one contract we're dealing with. Whether we got a closed shop arrangement, whether we got a private law,
Well, now, do all hospitals still have an MIR? A doctor has to be a member to
that problem is gonna increase in the morning. So now our patients come in without any medical insurance. They can all afford private nurses, and even many of these have got other insurance policies, which, and unfortunately, policies will say private registered nurses. And on their weekly, they sign out unavailable. And many times they don't pay for license like that. I had it happen many, many times. But they would have the availability of 3 private nurses for no need.
And it's good to stay with some operators at night, but they, because they can afford this service, they want someone there. And what happens if we don't help to take care of the patient, they bring in somebody they have found in the community, stay with this person, stay in the room as a relative or a friend. We know nothing about and find all kinds of things going on with these sick, they can say. I think if I might make a comment, interestingly enough, I read the minutes of the advisory committee as far back as 1962. Dr. Davis, I recall, was at the beginning of the work session, subcommittee, came up with very similar to what we have here again. And I would say that, one of the reasons that, I was one other hospital than ours, one of the reasons was this matter of placement. Back in 1962, recognized the need for having to carry the load and nursing service, trying to get nurses to patients who went home. This caused they come all the time, and still come. And seeing this as a responsibility to our patients and continuity of patient care, we still believe that maybe this is a community's responsibility for any other agency. We talked about this as early as 1962. The private practice group apparently were not interested in this at this time. And again, Ms. Honeycutt, I believe, was the chair of the registry committee as late as last spring, in which the advisory committee again tried to move for something that was some type of a compromise to try to have some control over whether the post-operative uncomplicated post-operative patient got the nurse or the patient who was complicated and needed the nurse. We get pressures from families, we get pressures from the physician, but we simply place a call, and whoever we would get, that's what we had. And now we have control of this. We have absolute control of it. It's not necessarily something we wish, but we're in the spot of providing patient care. Has nothing to do with who runs the registry or anything of this nature or the products. The problem is giving care to patients, placing the patients in as I see it.
If you would bear with me, and there are a couple of paragraphs here that I think I would like you to see the similarity between a national group of registrars and private duty as they solve a national problem, and it so closely relates it as your group has identified it here, that somehow it seems to me like the groups must be on the right track for these divergent groups to come. If a nurse's professional registry cannot enroll a sufficient number of registrars to meet the standards set by the Professional Association for Nursing Practitioners and Registered Services, such registry should be phased out of ownership and management by the District Nurses Association. Phasing out of the nurses' professional registry should be undertaken only after careful study and consultation with registrars who are providing the private nursing services, with directors of nursing healthcare facilities who utilize these services. When a nurse's professional registry is phased out, the district association, in fulfilling its professional responsibilities should exercise leadership in cooperation with private practice practitioners, nursing services of healthcare facilities, other community health agencies, to enlist community initiative in developing a nursing and auxiliary health workers recruitment and distribution center to meet the community's needs for private practice nursing and other nursing services. And I think that's in essence what was said in this report here.
I have one comment. All of us, I think, like to work in the attitude and environment that best suits our individual personality. I think we do a better job and we can help recruit others to join us in that effort. We have before us what the directors of nursing services basically have outlined as acceptable to them. Well, I would like to know what the private duty nurses would like as far as the time they would take to do their practice. Is there any difference between what the nursing service administrators have?
Well, we haven't had a chance to take this proposal back to the private duty nurses group and discuss it with them and get some opinions from them. So we're not authority to speak to them. This is wrong.
Right. Actually, then we're getting back to the main item, whether or not we will have a registry to meet all types of nursing requirements, or just separate those who are licensed in some way or another to run their nursing services.
Well, we know as well as everybody knows that there's not enough private nurses in the fifth district to take care of all the calls. Let's face it. There's not enough nurses in the hospitals to staff all their floors like they'd like to have it done either. It's nowhere. All we can do is do the best we can. Just strip them out somewhere to where they're needed the most.
But is the identity with the registry that they responsibility or function of the District Nurses Association sufficient important that we should strive and do everything we possibly can to create or purpose or to continue this arena, or we thought of looking at the line of how we can have a register, regardless of where it might be based, that we need the total of the request for private practice. Would y'all prefer it to be the way it is?
That's what we ought to figure out. We're voting on what the private duty say.
And go to court and then bring back to the state and discuss it again later. And I don't think we can realize that. Ms. Lambert, when you were on the committee, were you not with the community council from the same person?
And there's a language came out, it's the same legislation.
All these have been out, I know, and 19 and 60, 2 years ago, 1966, before the private duty group, these same general things were discussed. And at that time, the private duty group did not wish to even discuss them further. Was that not correct?
I'm sorry, this is not what I'm saying. As a whole.
That is what we try to do, is up communication with the state. And so many things that have taken place, the state knows nothing about. And so they have asked us to bring it back, and they voted on the law and decided to take it to me. But they did want to get the idea of the number straight, and then bring it back to 552nd for discussion. So we would certainly jump the gun, giving
When we had the meeting, last week, with the nursing service directors, representatives from
did not know about the system in there, but as the register has stood before, we have had two setups of the registered professional nurse and the LPN through the registry, and it has been passed since. Now we have not had civil service of a non-professional.
What is taxes in, on your system? What are you thinking? The cost of that registration?
I think that the hospital keeps it, and, all of their registered, and we have no problem. I think
We won't have a financial problem. If the hospitals will use the registry and there would be no reason why, say, if Emory wanted us to place their personal calls, or to place their personal calls, fine. You know, if they have their own call list that they won't let fall, then would be placed through the professional registry and all of the registered nurses who do private duty in the hospital will use the registry. Then we can support the registry, but we won't have the difficulty as far as licenses is concerned.
We also have this education.
We have an in-service educational, program, and not only that, we can have some means of control through our private use section in our fifth district, in setting our standards, and all, with the, and as a byproduct of that, it also helps set the standards for the LPNs who are on the register.
Of course, from the standpoint of it's evident that one central agency can do something a lot cheaper than 5 or 6 or 7 or 10.
Yes, sir.
But I feel like the districts, do provide us with seminars and keep us informed on the latest nursing trends. I mean, I've worked in other states, and that is always been fun. This set up some seminars and set up qualified nurses, which has not been done here in Atlanta.
We understand that we want to state, have our own man, that we are so many confident.
Of course,
This is
this
a
is
problem. This is a problem. We had a workstation, a forum, on trends in nursing, and repeated it 3 times during nursery last year. We didn't have 30 participants in the 3 sessions. We would have had 30 or so had it not been people who did it together. See, this is.
Well, when you're never informed,
Well, if this one, the nurses would do it, would, because
If we have that,
how's that going on?
continue program.
Well, why are we percent cards as these things?
That is our problem.
I mean, we don't attend the meetings as much as we should, because some of that, the cards could be sent out. I'm sure they have.
We had a full week of publicity on that program. Nursery is always very good, at least the last 8 years. And all newspapers, we had television, a program, everything was notified by mail. So we publicized the meeting. It was a splendid program.
I think that it is well taken that the district should, make some provision for educational programs. And I believe that we are working, within the district, particularly at the meetings, we are trying to have programs which are pertinent to all the groups. Now, I heard you when you said we needed more. We needed, perhaps more than we've had. And I will think about that. And I'm sure the district will. I'm not speaking for myself.
particular district in California, happens to be the Greater Los Angeles district, that has implemented the plan of classification, has built into it that to be classified as above, the average performance here to take care of these special cases, is that you must have attended X number. This is built right into the requirement column, and it's entirely impossible to do this, because I look at this as simply standards.
And also there's fees for attendance.
You have to be careful then to approve nurse meetings, because I think you must jealously guard what would be a standard of improvement of practice against what might be normal organizational business. You see, you have to watch this or you'll be misused and then defeat the original purpose.
Okay, love it.
May I ask one question? If we decide to close the registry due to finances, just close it to reorganize, would we be able to retain the charter to reopen the registry?
I really can't speak for it, I don't know enough about the information. I would think here again, legal counsel should check this out, because to me fundamentally is if you are not incorporated, you may have a license to operate as a business within whatever jurisdiction controls it. But if you're talking about a fundamental charter or incorporation, then I understand that the closest to this would be the state association. Now, whatever regulations governing the opening and closing of business would be what I'm sure you're talking about.
I would like to just make one comment. I think it's really important that we keep in mind the concept that we can meet with one central registry requirements. For those things that require registered nurses, licensed practical nurse service, or something at a low level of this, it would certainly, speed and meet in a better way how we run communities meetings. It might even be worthwhile if the tax exempt status is lost to figure out some way to overcome, whatever surplus, might be created. From the last few years, it doesn't look like we really need to worry about the taxing. And probably, as far as donations are concerned, the foundation could be set up on a nonprofit basis that would still enable any contributions that come in to be tax deductible and thus be encouraged. So I think if we can look at the need that needs to be met, and the best way we can meet that need, this would be our primary consideration.
Of course, that amendment on that I got, that would be, each hospital will have a member of one central administrative body, which would actually administrate the necessity of nursing care in that area. But there would still be, present communication system, wouldn't matter where you call,